Good morning. Welcome to a rainy Sunday. All right, guys, for you guys watching live, I'm probably going to turn this into a rainy Sunday show because we have an authentic, real rainy Sunday going on here right now. And for anyone that has ever watched this channel, and for the new people in the future that are here, rainy Sundays were the days that as a kid I couldn't go outside because it was raining too hard. And I would grab a stack of comics, a stack of Mad magazines, whatever was in the house. And we would crawl up on top of the bunk bed, be right against the roof of that trailer, be able to hear the rain as I sat there and went off into these comic books, to another world with them and stuff, right? Hey, John is here. And as always, as soon as John gets here in comments, that is my cue to ask you to graciously or aggressively or attentively hit that subscribe button. What do the kids used to say? Smash that thumbs up, and make sure you leave comments and stuff, and definitely hit the bell so you know when we get to do these. Where I'm at. We're going into fall and the winter months coming up, and that definitely gives me time to do this. So let's get a cup of coffee. Okay, smell your coffee, enjoy your coffee. Enjoy that aroma. And if you don't do that, at least definitely smell the old comics and stuff, right? Right. Let it take you back. Let you know what you're doing here and stuff, right? So I figured this morning we'll get together here and just kind of look at a few things here because I'm in the middle of sort of reading some things, going through some stuff, finding out I need to bag it because apparently the last 30 years have flown by. I'm like, I just bagged this. Or I see some comics that are kind of hot right now. And I'm like, man, I just got that out of a dollar box. And then I realized in 1994, that kind of thing, they've flown by. And this is a series that I probably got the first year or so off of the rack as it came out. Some of these are little, I think they came out in '88, the first couple of them. I enjoyed them immensely because they were of the time. You know what I mean? If you followed John Byrne, you got more in jokes. All right. So this is a series called What The that we're going to be talking about here in a minute, and kind of going through it. And it ran for 26 issues from what was it, 1988 to about 1993, and I thoroughly enjoyed it because, like I said, there were things in it that were in jokes, things that were going on in comics at the time that I was reading. And when, what was I, 15 years old when this came out. So, I was sort of easily amused with some of the things that were happening in these books. They were relevant, they were parodying, and of course they were, the Marvel mag of Mirth and Mayhem. So we'll probably go through a few of those and stuff, right? Give everybody a chance to pop in here. So on the Sunday morning when it's raining, it's kind of nice to just kind of take a minute, slow down your day. You're going to think this is an ASMR video, but it's not, right? But with comics being all in the '80s, very, very edgy, grim and gritty, you had a few alternatives there to kind of get out of that grim and gritty. You know what I mean? Saturday mornings, you could watch your Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles that were so different than the comics, the black and white comics, where they were, taking down ninjas left and right. There were stakes, very, very mature book at the time, right? In that alternative comic. Batman, Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, you know the drill. Even Mike Grail getting hold of, Green Arrow and the Longbow Hunters. They made everybody just went grim and gritty. They missed the whole point of what Frank Miller and Watchmen were doing. Frank Miller and Alan Moore and Watchmen and Dark Knight, what they were doing. But you had some alternatives. You actually had funny books out, right? You had books that were funny. You had Star Comics going on, right? If you really wanted to slow down and read some Care Bears and and some Thundercats, things like that, right? Or you could have went to anything that Keith Giffen was doing. DC Comics Presents. He had one of my favorite comics, Superman and the Legion of Superheroes. He had his Justice League that came out after that Legends miniseries that just blew up, became a freaking franchise for DC. Pitted a little bit against the X-Men there. When the X-Men had got dark, Morlock Massacre. And in response that I feel, they kind of came out with Excalibur with Chris Claremont and Alan Davis that had a little bit of humor to it and stuff, right? And then, of course, you had What the, right? That I've already sort of went over there, that this is, parodying comics. This is funny stuff. They had Kurt Busiek, Peter David, I think Stan Lee may have had something to do. I don't know, but definitely John Byrne, John Bogdanov. I think that's how you say that. You know me and names and stuff right there, right? And this was just so fantastic. Now, this what the I really would like to turn the camera around and maybe just, I don't know, have you look at these pages, but I'll hold them up. My coffee feels extremely needed this morning. Nothing like doing a live show when you're coming out of a slumber, so that just kind of makes it more fun. And I do all these spontaneous, right? But yeah, these what the books. Now, if you look at this before we kind of get into this, there's things that influence this stuff, right? And I feel like it's kind of like a comic book tradition that is fantastic. There's no doubt in my mind that, you know, tales calculated to drive you mad. Wally Wood, all these Harvey Kurtzman. See if we've got anybody else on here off the top of my head. Jack Davis. All these guys came out with parodies, right? After the Senate hearings, they had a magazine called Tales to Calculate You, to Drive You Mad. And the magazine actually didn't take off until I think it was Kurtzman and Wally Wood did a parody of Superman meets Captain Marvel's, right? It was like an unofficial return of Captain Marvel, if you will, for them. So maybe we'll do a live show where we kind of go through some of this older stuff, this humor magazine, right? Parodying things. Believe it or not, these are out of print, and I got these probably in 2016 for $7 a piece. And I wished I had never opened my volume 4. So I have volume 3 and volume 4 never opened. But Howler Mouse, you always talk about reading your comics and doing all that stuff, right? Well, they came out with this magazine, Tales Calculated to Drive You Mad, where you have reprints of said issues. All right. So I have a few of these laying around. So I've read this stuff. And then the stepdad would buy a Mad magazine in the house, and we could have a few Mad specials where they reprinted some of these issues as an insert in some of the Mad magazines in the 70s and stuff, right? So no doubt in my mind that those influenced Marvel. And they came out with Not Brand Eck in the 70s. Jack Kirby, the Severins, Stan Lee, everybody got on there and they were parodying Marvel comics. And it was called Not Brand Eck because they were taking a little shot there at DC, if you will, their distinguished competition. So there would be things in there. And you had Inferior 5 that would take little shots at Marvel here and there and stuff, right? So it was all in good fun. It really was all in good fun. I don't think there was anything in there that ever got personal or went too far and stuff, right? So with the return of that, over the years, they would put out other little funny books. Spoof. These are things I just have laying around. I can't really tell you too much about them, but Spoof, as you look at this, it tells you exactly when it came out. All in the Family, and I'm trying to think of who that is. Anyway, it's supposed to be like Charlie Brown. They're getting spoofed, if you will, and some other Sunday strip, things like that. They had ARG. I'm sure there was others over the years, but I absolutely love these. They're fun when you get in the mood for them. So then all of a sudden we get this book, and this is an homage to Not Brand Eck #1, I believe, with the placement of the characters and stuff, right? Friar Tuck, good morning, Howler. Good to see you, Friar Tuck. So let's take a minute here before we get into this. I'm probably gonna have to bag these because these are white covers, but these I bought right off the rack, 1988. Reread them, and did not have comic book bags and stuff. So the fact that they have survived as well as they have totally blows my mind. So for a parody comic, as we can see, they still had the classic Marvel corner box stuff they would do things with. I miss those. There we go. The Marvel Mag of Mirth and Mayhem. That white cover is going to mess up the focus. When Titans Tumble, we have Wolverine being exactly the opposite. Forget it, bub. We're on break. And then you have the Hulk sitting there. Not the big angry Hulk and stuff, but a very distinguished Hulk saying union rules, don't you know? Human Torch is reading the comic that we're holding. We have the Punisher cross-stitching, Spider-Man doing s'mores, and they're refusing to do the Titan Tuzzles obligatory crossover right off the cover. And it says "S'more action than you can stand," which is why that Spider-Man is having the Human Torch cook his s'mores, if you will, right off his head without him knowing. Of course, you have She-Hulk back there on lunch break. Parodies they would have would be ads from comic books on the side. If you want to be an artist, call us here. Here's looking for gullible people with lots of money. Terry Austin, if you will, apparently did this because there was always things in comics like "Let us teach you how to ride." Right? You got a table of contents, black and white starting out. Dr. Doof kind of walking you through some of this stuff, right? And then we walked into, EC Comics Wally Wood inspired parody going right into it, right? So this started out at 4 issues, right? It ran for 26 issues. And at the end of the 4th issue, if I remember right, I think they had guys, help me out here, right? We're all in this together, even though I'm the host here, supposed to do all this stuff. But they had a sidekick. Let me see if I see who he is, right? But there was a sidekick, okay? Alfred E. Newman was the sidekick for, I hate to say sidekick, but I don't know what else to call them. Mascot, maybe a mascot, was a mascot for Mad Magazine. There was a magazine by Marvel. That was another Marvel one. And they had their own little mascot, who I thought was great. Cracked Magazine had a mascot, a little janitor with blonde hair. And Marvel's Not Brand X had Forbush Man, who wore a pot on top of his head in, those red underwear they used to. It looked like Super Goof a little bit with boxer shorts on the outside, but he had a pot on his head with the handle there, and he was the Forbush Man, right? So the Forbush Man would end up showing up, and he would ask you to, hey man, if you want more of this, write letters. So the first 4 issues is really why I think there were such superstars on it of the time. The Sumerian, I used to pick up vs.The at Sky City when I was younger. I also remember freaking out and seeing Alf had an Evolutionary War annual. Great memories. I still have my Alf #1, sir. And I'm kind of wondering now if I picked up that Evolutionary War, but So that's what I'm saying. That's what I was getting at. I remember I have a Slimer #1 from Now Comics and stuff, right? So there was humor out there in the world of grim and gritty, but just so much room on a newsstand. You follow what I'm saying? So anyway, we had our Punisher, Peter B. Gillis, Hilary Barta, John Severin, and the Severins give it that touch because they worked on the original Not Brand X and stuff, right? And this is what I'm saying. June Brigman, who actually did the Power Pack, they had, like I said, this were relevant to what the comics were on the stands at the time and the characters that were there. That's kind of what made it so fun to be 15 years old and actually see these characters. Now, Not Brand X is fantastic, you know what I mean? But it is of the 60s. So here's Terry Austin writing, June Brigman coming on. They even did parodies. Don't be fooled by any advertisements. Right, they did a parody of Charles Atlas there, where you can be Iron Man on the beach. And like I said, there was just so much stuff. The more you knew about these characters, the more fun you had with it. I was definitely a bit more of a cloak and dagger. And then, of course, what we have here, making fun of the X-Men in the Danger Room, the bullish bulletins. If you have a comic from 1988, everything in it is parodied, right down to a checklist. X-Men when Titans bunch. And I think you get the idea, man. Everybody's parodied. X-Men had taken over. All the other characters wanted of the Marvel Universe wanted their time back. Like, we're heroes too. We brought the Silver Age and everything, right? And there's little things that really cracked me up because nobody could really understand how what is his name? Oh, am I going blank on it, man? But anyway, there was a Doctor Strange ripoff character. But anyway, in the Avengers, and I'm going to remember his name out of the blue, but there were things where people didn't really like him being in the Avengers. And if you were in the know, they would put little shots in there without, being too harsh, if you will. And they would bring everybody. The Titans tussle, all the heroes wanting the X-Men to settle down so their books could get big. We got the Fantastic Four at the time. West Coast Avengers with Moon Knight, X Factor, Alpha Flight coming in, which cracked me up with the alfalfa look. Of course, the Avengers, Grey Hulk, Spider Man, just so much good stuff. And then all of a sudden, you would have the Beyonder pop up, and they would scream out, no Beyonder in this, right? So it was just so fantastic. Like they were parodying what was going on with comics, how crossovers were getting huge, company-wide crossovers were getting huge, and they pulled in a little Monty Python where the artist died because it was too much. You know what I mean? Like there was just so much there. And in my house, Monty Python was a thing, right? And what it made it even better is that you even have Steve Ditko getting in on it. Steve Ditko had been doing comics since the 50s. These guys have grown up in all these eras. But yeah, even making, little parody shot at his circles and stuff with his psychedelic Doctor Strange dimensions and stuff, right? Just fun stuff, man. And then of course you would even have letter pages that were a farce, if you will, or maybe they were real. I don't know. Anyway, but what they did back in the day, and I don't know if they did that with this, but there were certain people who would get copies prior to a comic coming out. So kind of filler copies, and preview issues, and they would write in, and if they did, their letters would be printed in the first issue on the get-go, which I thought was fantastic. That is no, it's in there. Yeah, these are definitely gonna get rebagged today. I have about 30 issues of Grant Morrison's Doom Patrol I need to bag, but I think these need it also, right? Okay, great stuff, guys. Right, so then we have the issue that is probably my favorite issue, right? I was a Byrne victim, right? I was on top of some of the Fantastic Four by Byrne. I now have a complete set that was completed thanks to people back in the day, like the Great Legend and stuff. They sent me copies out of nowhere that filled in the gaps of my Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four fans, since I was a kid, didn't stand a chance. The Fantastic Four stuff was in the house. Dr. Doom was in the Kiss Super Special that we had in the house, Kiss magazine. I still have the Stepdad's Marv Wolfman runs and stuff like that. The cartoon from the 70s was on when I was a kid. The Thing got his own cartoon on Saturday mornings. And even without all that, I really dug Airwalker. I mean the Treasury edition that reprinted 121 to 124 or something like that. So yeah, it was in the house, and it was that particular issue, that Treasury edition with Galactus on the cover. I have 2-3 copies now that reprinted that Stanley Joe Mishima thing that really made me a fan. That first, as soon as I opened up that splash page where Reed is doing some science stuff, and he's made this little machine that instantly makes chocolate chip cookies for his kid and stuff. When you're 5 years old, you're like, I want the chocolate chip cookie machine, sir. That needs to be real. How cruel of you not to have that out for everybody. So anyway, so John Byrne had done all these things in comics with Fantastic Four, the epic illustrated Last Galactus story. I remember seeing covers. Official handbook of the Marvel Universe had Byrne art throughout, and of course he's the guy that did a lot of the floating heads for the Marvel comic box. Then he jumps over to DC, revitalizes Superman to lead up to his 50th anniversary, revamps him, if you will, takes them back to basics, screws up a little bit of Legion continuity, Legion of Superheroes, by wiping out Superboy, works on Batman, does a little Doom Patrol, gets within there and does a little dabble with some Teen Titans and Action Comics and Legends, does, pencils crossover events, things like that. I thought what he did was absolutely fantastic. And then you started getting the idea that he might be headed back to Marvel. And he did at the time, right? He started taking over the Star brand, changed it from Star brand to the Star brand. It was bi-monthly. And he also popped in on this, where he did the parody of pitting Superman against the Fantastic Four with a wink and a nudge, right? And in this story that he did, he actually includes a lot of the criticism he received from fans. He had a Lex Luthor-like character come in and talk about the criticisms at the time, right? Meanwhile, if the more you know, the more jokes you got. John Byrne would do interviews of where he explained how he did. See, this is what's so great about being there at the time. They talked about, how did you make the S so well and so perfect? He said, well, the way I look at things, the yellow parts, the negative space, I always saw them as fish. They're fish. I draw the fish. I don't draw the S. He draws the negative space, right? So right off the bat, I started cracking up as a kid because as we have Superb Man going all the way back to EC Comics, Superb Man fighting the Fantastical Four. If you look at the Superman S, he's drawn fish on them. Bunch of inside jokes. Plus, we have John Byrne back on the Fantastic Four where he belongs. There's an anniversary issue of Action Comics well after Byrne had left where he came in and did a few pages. And what was very cool about it is you had Mr. Mxyzptlk, okay, fighting Superman. Well, Byrne did it to where Mxyzptlk, who's from the fifth dimension, travels around dimensions and things. Well, in the book, he had him jump to another dimension, and you see the feet of the Fantastic Four, or not the Fantastic Four. And Mxyzptlk has taken a different form. He's all green. And the Fantastic Four are like, just walk away from him. He wants attention. We don't need attention. He loses his mind, right? So John Byrne technically has made Mxyzptlk and the Impossible Man the same character, which I think is hilarious. I'm going to have to find that. See, this is what happens when I start going through these books. That's why I don't script this stuff, right? So anyway, the more you know about the Superman run, you don't need to know anything, right? It's still funny. But the more you know about John Byrne's Fantastic Four run, his Superman run, what he was doing with it, Lex Luthor, the more fun you will have with this, right? Again, the contents page is there, letting you know what's coming. Mike Mignola is also in this, right? So, like I said, flat out, there's the fish, there's the Lex Luthor character, the Comics Code Authority. Man, I ripped off. I just realized this version of This Night, I ripped that off so much in little cartoons I was drawing in class at school. You know, we got our Dr. Bloom. You know, so this is just fantastic stuff. And who's the team on this? Who's inking him? Jerry Ordway, John Byrne and Jerry Ordway. So officially the Superman team, if you will, is on this. And John Byrne and Jerry Ordway did some Fantastic Four books there for a little bit. I want to say it's probably like less than 6 months, if I'm remembering right. Jerry Ordway was a little frustrated at DC because Roy Thomas, he felt, and they're still friends. I've seen them doing panels at Heroes Con, but I don't think he felt like Roy Thomas was putting out his best work. It was probably affected by Crisis, wiping out what he did at All-Star Squadron and Infinity Inc. That took place on Earth 2, and Crisis was taken away, all that stuff. But anyway, he felt like he wasn't really being used correctly. So he jumped over to Marvel, and they put him inking the Fantastic Four, and they talked him back by saying, you want to come ink George over here on Crisis on Infinite Earths? So that's what was going on there. So anyway, we get all sorts of funny humor here. Lego blocks. The fish are falling off of Superman. There's a S there. He tries to swoon. He tries to swoon Sue Storm. And as you can see, his beard keeps growing and stuff, right? So I think if I remember right, I think he might be making a little bit fun of the evil Superman from Superman 3. And anyway, here's where where Lex Luthor goes on a big rant about all the stuff that they're bitching about, that the fans did about Superman and stuff like that. And Superman's hair keeps growing longer and longer. I think that's a little thing about them laughing about how the Superman shave. He uses his heat vision in a mirror, you know. But anyway, as you can see, the more you know, right? For retirement, Fred Hembeck comes in. He does some writing with John Severin. And like I said, the Severins married John Severin. They give it that feel. They were there in the 60s doing Not Brand X also. So there's something for everybody. New fans, older fans. The famous Ink School by Terry Austin. You know, acting like anybody can just pick up a pencil and do whatever they need to do. And then here's Al Milgrom doing the story by Mike Mignola, Wolf R. Eam, which is just so funny. And I've used some of the sound effects on this. This is just a complete parody on Wolverine being the best there is, and what he does isn't pretty. I'm the best there is at what I do, and what I do isn't very nice and stuff, right? Downright fancy, right? So yeah, Mike Mignola, early Mike. Well, he's not that new at this point, but Mike Mignola coming in and doing some funny stuff with John Byrne. These two actually ended up doing the World of Krypton together, and in a Superman book and a little Action Comics 600, and they did Hellboy together, right? Peter B. Gillis comes in with Phil Folio, and they do Doctor Deranged with a lot of their B-list characters at the time, you know. So yeah, we get Zatanna and Doctor Fate and Doctor Strange. Here we go with the distinguished competition, the Phantom Stranger. To me, this is shades of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, where Swamp Thing is traversing the dimensions to get to hell to save Abby. If you know the story, she's been banished to hell, and he meets Spectre and Deadman and all them on the way and stuff like that. We get the Spectre in here. So these the anti-monitor, you know. Doctor Strange meeting DC stuff. So that's what I'm trying to tell you, man. This stuff is just fantastic. This is before we had crossovers left and right and amalgamations and things like that. We had a few Treasury editions, and the Teen Titans had met the X-Men, but we didn't get the George Perez Marv Wolfman version. We got the Chris Claremont version. We got Marvels. We didn't get DC's. We had the JLA Avengers canceled. You know, Batman and the Hulk came out. Superman and Spider-Man. So this was fun to see, right? And then, what we got here? I always thought Byrne's She-Hulk would be available in dollar boxes since it was more humorous. It was for decades, sir. It was. Okay. That's how I replaced issues of mine. Okay. Not what the level humor, but still, thus always got other stuff instead. Little did I know. Yeah, it's hilarious. Oh my God, going back to like 2010 or 11, it's actually the video I did showing John Byrne's She-Hulk that was underappreciated at the time. That's what's so cool about having this stuff documented, at least on YouTube and stuff with dates and things like that. My She-Hulk, John Byrne's She-Hulk video was where I finally had a format. It just clicked. I finally knew what I was sort of doing on YouTube. I had a little setup. I had some books behind me. You know, I had some decent light for where I was living at the time. I was living with a completely different person at the time. 15 years ago, sir. It blows my mind. And it was John Byrne's She-Hulk talking about those books, trying to tell people you need to grab this stuff. They're cheap. So I have the video where I'm right there with you. Luckily, I had a majority of that run from when it came out at the time. I'm thinking I was missing some issues in the 40s, and I was able to grab those. I actually could show you the very issues that I had to catch up on in the mid 2000s because they weren't bagged. I just recently bagged them. So the third issue, and like I said, this is what was going on at the time, right? We could get the Raven versus Spider-Ham, right? This is the famous Kraven's Last Hunt parody, and I think it might actually be a Mike Zeck cover, guys. And if it's not, it is done. It is damn close. Spider-Ham versus Raven the Hunter. So at this time, Peter Porker Spider-Ham had been a backup feature, I think, in Marvel Tales. He had his own series at Star Comics. Yet, you know, whenever we're going to parody a little bit of Spider-Man, we whip out the Spider-Ham. And I absolutely loved this because I loved Kraven's Last Hunt as it was coming out. All right. Like I'm like, this is my era of comics. This is my Spider-Man story. Came out weekly with the same writing team and artist. Went through all the Spider-Man books. I mean, who doesn't know Kraven's Last Hunt? As a matter of fact, there should be a playlist, if I'm remembering right, where years ago, a bunch of YouTube channels, including mine, I was invited by somebody. We did a Watchmen. Everybody took a chapter of the Watchmen and talked about it. Everybody talked about, there's another playlist where we have the Dark Phoenix saga. And I feel like I should have one of Kraven's Last Hunt. I'm not sure. Maybe it's my imagination, or maybe I'll watch somebody else do it. So we have Glenn Herdling, Alex Saviuk, which I think is just fantastic. Considering that guy did some Spider-Man stuff. We're going to have a pinup by Todd McFarlane in this, doing a parody of Batman. All right. So, like I said, this is all just great, fun stuff, man. And like I said, if you read the comics, you get the jokes. Kraven in Kraven's Last Hunt, to become the Spider, somehow he was able to get tons of spiders to fall on him in a room, and he would eat them. And this one, Craven's Last Hunt, to become the Spider Ham, he takes out a Care Bear, and then he eats a lot of bacon. Okay. I mean, I don't know why that cracks me up, man. But anyway, so if you read that, we have a actual rat, okay, to take over a character that was in Craven's Last Hunt, Vermin. It's coming back to me, you know. So it's all there, guys. The more you know, the better. To take such a dark story like that, make it moody and still make it funny. And of course, he actually meets Jim Salyerkrupp and all these guys. There's a framing sequence with the actual creative team and editors and stuff. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Joe Sinnott comes in and inks Richard Howell. Richard Howell, I do believe, did some All-Star Squadron before this, but yeah, Homecoming of Scarlet Witch and Vision. They had two miniseries, one miniseries, one maxi series that really worked up. And if you're into the TV show, this is fantastic. There's the Salem 6 coming in there. Just great stuff. And then if you look real close, we have Scarlet Witch dressed up like Wonder Woman. They would change costumes and stuff. So if you read that limited series that was there, and then here's some forgotten McFarlane work, right? It's a parody of Batman. I don't know who wrote this. Maybe it'll say on the next day, The Birth of a Hero. And we have not Bruce Wayne at Wayne Manor sitting in the chair trying to figure out how he can scare those superstitious and cowardly villains, and a baseball comes through, and a kid says, "Hey man, you got my baseball?" And he sees a bat, and he goes, "A bat?" And we get our Batman. So yeah, with Robert, the Bat Boy Wonder, as his sidekick. And of course you have to have some, so take that in. There's some McFarlane art for you. Everybody's all crazy about, what is it, Batman 423 with that fantastic cover where he's got his cape real big, the moon behind him, he's on the ledge, a cliffside, if you will, and he's got a woman wrapped up in his oversized cape. Well, here's some more Batman for you. And down here, I just realized this. The Marvel legal department sent this to Peter David, Todd McFarlane, and Jim Salyerkrupp. Said, forget it, guys. No ways this sees print. They weren't going to print this. It's too close to the actual Batman yet. There it is. Fred Hembeck comes in. If you don't know Fred Hembeck, then you just missed an entire era that I feel sorry for you. He's doing his Fred Hembeck Daredevil stuff. Marvel superheroes with pet partners. So since Daredevil is blind, he gets to see an eye dog. You see what I'm saying? Polar Penguins, Man Thing gets Gatorade. Some of these are funnier than others. Then we get the Mutant Beach Party, right? Fall of the Mutants had taken place, and they bring in Kurt Busiek before anybody knew who Kurt Busiek was, years before Marvel's. Kyle Baker. And as you can see, they come in there and they parody the X-Men and their angst and their Fall of the Mutants. I absolutely love this because I'm finally giving in, So just a lot of funny stuff in there, not taking themselves too serious, which is what's very funny, which is fantastic. And I think that one actually goes into the next issue, which I want to show you here. Like I said, this was a 4-issue series at first, right? And that led into issue number 4, Mutant Beach Party. Now, again, if you know the ad for the Fall of the Mutants, this is hilarious. Instead of all them laying there dead in the desert by sunset, they're all on the beach just hanging out, tanning. And they're talking about, it's all coming back to me as I talk to you, like the great mutant enemy is coming. They're coming. And this kind of harkens back a little bit to the first issue where it actually turns out to be the Marvel Universe coming at them, saying, we're tired of you getting all the talent and all the attention. We're also in the Marvel Universe. So when I was watching the Marvel movies build up from Iron Man all the way to Avengers, I would think of this story. Because Fox had the X-Men, and now they had to really go deep into the Kirby stuff in the 60s and stuff to start building the Avengers and stuff like that with Iron Man. And I always thought about this story. So at the end of it, all the Avengers were like lemmings and fell off this cliff, and that's where we pick up. As you can see, we continue the parodies, But anyway, there's a lot of stuff. Everybody gets up. everybody's, the more you know about this era of the X-Men mutant books, the funnier the jokes are, guys. Even Excalibur shows up. Like we're all getting all the mutants together, and they're saying silly things. And there it is. This is where the Marvel Universe, the rest of the heroes of the Marvel Universe comes at them. Longshot is like, it's them. It had to be. Now I understand everything. Even Uatu, the Watcher, comes down to see this moment in history, and we get all of the other Marvel heroes. Uh, Spider-Man is yelling, "We've had it up to here with you outselling muties. We're going to wipe you off the face of comics by Iron Man. Spider-Man again. We used to be stars, and we're going to be stars again." And then Punisher's right in the middle of all this and says, "We're going to enjoy it." So with all the Marvel movies and stuff that years later, I feel like this story has a whole other relevance to me. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm trying to tell you. These were smart. There's some Shang-Chi in here, some more Fred Hembeck guys. You follow me? And I'm just going to show a few more here. But I love this one. When Titans clash, you have Justice and Starbrand with, really bad taste in clothes. They clash. You have Lone Wolf and Chris Claremont doing a little bit of Lone Wolf and Cub here parody, which I really appreciated. I had not read Lone Wolf and Cub yet, but I knew this was good. You know what I mean? Like, I was sort of like, whatever this is, I have to get a hold of. Captain America with his All-Scar Squadron, making, a little jab at DC again. How all these villains are scarred up, and All-Star Squadron. And Hardball, yeah, and the Forbish Man finally makes his return, right? So let me get back here. Oh yeah, they have a little parody on Archie Comics there. 4 pages of Starchy. And Fred, actually, I was completely wrong. I guess it wasn't Forbish Man. It's Fred Hembeck and Brother Voodoo saying, "Write in if you want more of this." All right. So that was the 4 issues. And here's where they kind of poked fun at comic book collectors at the time, right? The U universe, right? And this is what I was always trying to talk about. There's a stigma with comics that's still around. This is the way people still kind of look at comic book collectors down in a basement, stacks of comic books and useless memorabilia and stuff like that. So there you go, man. Yeah, the world inside your window. The parody of the new universe is the U universe as a comic book collector, right? So yeah, that kind of shows you there, right? So people wrote in, and we got more of this. I can't remember if they were bi-monthly or quarterly or what was going on. But those first issues, you had Steve Ditko, Mike Mignola. We just saw it. John Byrne, you know what I mean? A lot of Peter David, a little Todd McFarlane there, who was a rising star. It felt like overnight. And a lot of that. So when they got to come back, they had to get a little bit more of a creative team on there, right? You didn't really have a lot of those guys. You still had John Byrne coming in and kind of doing covers, and they would have a few, they had a few things going on to try to get sales going, but I'm glad it lasted as long as it did. So when they were able to come back, the first thing we get is, I think, a guy named Rurik Tyler and some other guys on here, and we get Wolverine versus Punisher. But as you can see, there's a Pulverizer and Wolverine. They're all back and stuff, right? So we're going to skip that, and we're going to get ahead to the one I actually love. A little bit of Alpha Flight, some John Byrne covers here. But we skip ahead to issue 7. And this is where we get a little bit meta again. Maybe that's the word I've needed, meta. So before I show you this number 7, see what's going on here. The Sumerian again. Wait a minute, excuse me, we read that. Paulo Costa is here. What's up? And here we are again. Yes. So guys, let me take this moment here and ask you guys to subscribe, hit that bell so you'll know when we do this. Leave comments and all that good stuff. Leave your memories. And we get to the issue of all issues of what in my opinion, right? So for years, people wanted the Justice League versus the Avengers and stuff, right? And we ended up getting it in this. This is the Avengers versus Just a League. This is a bold issue, my friends. I feel like that might be a John Byrne cover. It is. It's a John Byrne cover. And this is a book where you just need to Take it all in. You've got your evil villain watching in a monitor. Right there, Guy Gardner, front and center, guys. What year is this? I feel like this is 87 by now. That can't be 1990. Oh, my beat up issue. Man, that is some tiny, tiny print. Guys, they have put, look how tiny that is. That is super tiny. All right, I can't even read that, so I want to have to look it up. But I feel like, I think it says 1990. It seems like I knew that before that, right? But anyway, you can just take in this cover, see that how John Byrne filled that with all these great characters. You know who's who. And as I'm telling you this, the Batman with his ears like that reminds me that I was watching the Ralph Bakshi, John Kricfalusi Mighty Mouse cartoon. It feels like when this came out, and there was an episode where it was Bat, followed by Pee-wee's Playhouse, guys. All right. Oh, man, Garfield and Friends were on. Anyway, so it's us against them. And on the inside, we had Scott Lobdell, Rurik Tyler, and Brad K. Joyce. Terry Kavanagh, was editing this. I kind of always felt bad for that guy. So in this one, we get the Avengers versus the Justice League, Merry Mutant Melodies, Awful Flight, and Patsy Walker. But this was the issue, guys, that I absolutely loved. They did the floating heads whenever they had the Justice Society and Justice League coming in there to cross over the years and stuff, right? Justice League number 207 with the Crime Syndicate, All-Star Squadron, and Justice Society from 1982 is still one of my favorite crossovers because I was 9 years old and I had to work to get my butt out to town to get all parts of that. That was my time. So anyway, we get everything in here, right? And I really wish that when they had reprinted the Kurt Busiek, George Perez Justice League versus the Avengers, JLA versus the Avengers official that they did around, what was it, 2000, 2001, where we finally got that. That I wish they had included this, right? It is of its time, you know. There's all sorts of in-jokes for that era. Marshmallow Man, the Martian Manhunter. What I appreciated, a little throwback to the Robotic Stooges hidden in there, if you know that. You know, so I'm like all sorts of stuff in here. Ivory, everybody losing their crap. Going back to Tex Avery cartoons with some influence. The Blue Beetle, Booster Gold. We know how I feel about that. Oh, man. But they went Ringo with them. They went full Ringo with them. The Joker, Marvel. Yeah, I mean, this is totally worth getting, man. So, yeah. So, anyway, here was this amazing 2-page spread with some funky perspective that is just dead on of the big battle that led up to it. Now, I would study this. Man. I mean, it was so good. So good. And, of course, with the end of it, we got Dick Giordano and Stan Lee and a bunch of the creators coming in. And it had its funny little thing, right? Of course, there's funny stuff, right? But I think you get the point, right? This is a series worth getting. I actually think the first year is totally worth getting. As with most things, here's issue 14. By 1991, we got issue 14. So I guess that, you know, that's why I find it hard to believe. Okay. Number 9 with a Byrne still doing the covers. A lot of Wolverine on these covers, right? This actually was a key for a little bit. Wolverina, you know, they did a parody of Wolverine with Wolverina years before X-23, if you will. You know, that's why I started saying that, like, a lot of modern comics, they don't really create like they used to. New characters and stuff, a lot of it's derivative. Number 12, there's a number 8 that's missing I bought with a huge John Byrne cover of Forbush Man on there. The Savage Wit of What the Christmas issue. They introduced these two characters in the vein of Cloak and Dagger as Milk and Cookies. Here's number 15. I have 2 of those. As you can see, you know, it just kind of turned into what it was. Yet again, another Wolverine versus the Pulverizer cover. It's the era of Spider-Man, Wolverine, and Punisher, and a little Ghost Rider by this time. You put them on the cover, you got some sales. Number 18, getting a little relevant. This was the early years of The Simpsons being on TV. So you get some Simpson stuff in this one. Number 19, again in the background. I called it, there's Wolverine, Punisher, and Ghost Rider on the cover. We get a little War of the Worlds, a little EC influence there with number 22. The Infinity War crossover. Yeah, we could bring back all the characters. They had a cast of characters starting to pop up in vs.The in the anthology series. And there they are, Milk and Cookies, John Byrne cover. Yep, not Cloak and Dagger. And by issue 25, this ended up being an all-parody issue, Beach Summer Special to end the series. I think this is 1993. So yeah, I've made a few issues here and there, but I'm always keeping an eye on them, right? So it's just such fun stuff, guys, right? So if you like the idea of talking about some funny comics and stuff, if you want me to whip out my stuff on the early years of Mad Magazine, talking about the tales calculated to drive you mad, whipping out my Mad archives and stuff of the early years, we can do that at some point. If you have any other series you want me to try to dig through and see what I have in my Not Brand Eck and things like that, if you want more about this, let me know, right? And if you have suggestions, comments, or stuff, definitely leave them. So once again, make sure you're subscribed, hit the bell, give it a thumbs up. Thanks for popping in here, guys. But I feel like if you're going to get vs.The, your mileage is going to differ after about the first year, in my opinion, right? 12, 13 issues. I think those are definitely worth getting. Definitely the first 4. All right. And then up until issue 12 or 13. And then after that, you're either in or you're not. You know what I mean? It ends up becoming its own little world, Fun stuff. Fun stuff. Okay, guys. So be excellent to each other. Make sure that you actually let's read your comics, enjoy them, be excellent to each other, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Mad Jack Davis, enough said. Now that's the way to end it. Jack Davis is and always be a legend and stuff, right? That makes me want to pull out his last known published work off the top of my head, which was a Goon comic, if I remember right. I should have that. Anyway, later, guys. Enjoy your Sunday.